What's going on, everyone? Philly Insider. Welcome in, talking some playoff roster predictions today. Honestly, I don't have too much to say on the game. Weston Wilson played in center field for, I think, the third time in his professional career. That's kind of what I have to tell you about today's game is I don't think they're really like super I don't think they're really chasing the one seed or anything. Obviously, they are the two seed now, so that is set in stone. But I think they're prioritizing rest over getting the one seed over the Dodgers, which I think I agree with that. I honestly kind of preferred the two seed, to be quite honest, and I'm not just saying that because they didn't play well the past 2 days. That's honestly what I preferred. But Drew, how we doing? And any thoughts on today's game or yesterday's game? I don't really have too many.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just been like a lull of the last couple games. It's just, I think they're just ready for the playoffs at this point. It's kind of they're kind of playing that way, so I don't really have too much to say about it. I mean, I'm ready for the playoffs, and I think pretty much they are too at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're all kind of ready for October. And obviously, we were talking about it before the pod. The second half hasn't exactly gone, I think, how anyone had hoped it would. But that's what happens sometimes is you get out to such a hot start and you get out to a big lead early on that you kind of just have to manage along the rest of the way and get to where you need to go. And sure, they didn't end up with the best record in baseball like they had in the first half at certain points, or, they didn't end up with the top spot in the National League, but I'm honestly fine with the two seed. I think the matchup there could be much more favorable, to be quite honest. It's really not a cakewalk this year. The National League is very, very good. The wild card teams are very, very good. The Padres have incredible pitching. They have enough bats to beat you. They scare me. So we will avoid playing them in the first round. I think they're pretty much locked into the 4 seed at this point. And then the Diamondbacks, we obviously saw them last year. They have 2 frontline starters who are getting into a groove right now. They have enough pieces to beat you in a 5-game series. Absolutely, they do. The Mets have a lot of vibes this year, which I hate to say, but they do. That scares me a little bit. They have, and honestly, the Mets have like 1 to 2 elite talents, but they have like everyone on that team is like very solid. Like you look everywhere on the diamond and everywhere in the pitching staff outside of the bullpen, they have a lot of solid players, so they can beat you in a number of ways. Bullpen does not scare me for the Mets, but in a short series, they can beat you. And then there's the Braves, who, look, they lost a lot of pieces this year. Their lineup really does not scare me. 1 through 5 is pretty good, but it's not great. I think it's beatable. But they still have Reynaldo Lopez, Chris Sale, Max Fried, and Spencer Schwellenbach's been really good for them this year, too. Like, that's still a really good pitching staff. So all these teams can win a 5-game series, but I think getting the 3 matchup with whoever the Brewers face, like, if it's Brewers-Braves, bring on whoever that is. I'm really not going to be super scared of either opponent, to be quite honest. I think the Brewers are great. They have a lot of good pitching. They have a very good defense behind that pitching, too. I just don't think – I think there's a reason – the bats are a big reason they haven't been able to advance much further in the past few years. So they just aren't really that scary to me. That's kind of where I stand on the wild card race right now and the seeding and everything. So I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the biggest threat as far as the wild card goes, in my opinion, is probably the Padres, just because they have a pretty good balance of hitting and pitching, and obviously they lost Blake Snell going into this year, so everybody kind of thought like, maybe they won't be as good, but here they are. They almost won their division. They were pretty close, and nobody would have thought that 2 months ago. So definitely been an impressive second half from them, and I don't think there's a whole lot of people that are going to be excited to play them come playoff time for sure. And I think the Phillies are the same way, though. No matter what happens, like nobody wants to play us because we have such a balance of pitching and hitting, and everybody knows that. We've showed it off the last 2 Octobers, and I don't think it's really changed much. So I think maybe the bio actually help them a little bit because they're obviously not healthy, like in a lot of places. Like Stott's not healthy, Harper's not healthy, and JT's obviously been banged up a lot this year. So stuff like that just it really like adds up over time, and I think the bio will do them a lot of good.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the last 2 years they've had guys pitching deep into the season when they never have before. I mean, the last 2 years are the first time ever that Nola, Wheeler, like any of these starting pitchers have gone into late October. So now you give these guys a week off, and if they are able to make it past the NLDS round, that would really pay dividends down the road, I think. We can talk about the buy and the fact that it's maybe detrimental to some teams. It's also helped some teams too. Like the Astros ran through the AL the year they had the buy and the year they beat us. They obviously ran into a little bit of trouble against us early, and then they figured it out and they dominated us the rest of that series. So obviously the Rangers did not have a bye last year, but it can be done. When you have a dominant club, you can just run through series no matter what. So with that said, I mean, what Martian talks about Zach Wheeler, and yeah, that is the one frustrating thing is the bats do concern me, and it's just so infuriating to see Wheeler post gems like he does on the regular, and then he just doesn't get the run support. I mean, that guy he could be a 20-game winner if he got run support. Seriously, like that guy just goes out there and just throws chatter every single game. It's incredible. So I mean, it was disappointing today, but again, today I'm not really upset about it. It's just there's a lot of other games with Wheeler I'm upset about that they've wasted gems from him for. So hopefully in the playoffs, like Martian said, that is not the case, and hopefully they focus up when next week hits because they're going to need him. They're going to need or not him. They're going to need the bats. Obviously, I mean that is really my big concern with the team, but we'll talk about that a little bit more once we get into this playoff roster too. And like Brian said, not a lot of momentum right now, but again, sometimes there isn't always momentum going into October. I mean, in 2022, we didn't have momentum going into October. We backed into it. The Brewers choked, and we got that last wild card spot. And then we got hot, and we got lucky with that game one of the wild card, and we took advantage. And then we carried that momentum through the rest of the playoffs. I mean, plenty of like the Rangers, they blew the division lead last year and ended up as the wild card, and then they went through the AL and just dominated. So I don't think just because they don't have momentum right now, like that doesn't necessarily concern me because plenty of teams go into October cold. And right now it's like, yeah, sure, it's great to be peaking right now, but that also doesn't mean you're going to be peaking when October hits. It's a completely different ball game. So we will see.
Yep. Yeah, and you've seen it a lot of times in the last couple of years. Like the teams that do have buys go in red hot, and they have to sit for a few days, and then they don't come out and play well. Maybe it'll kind of be like the opposite effect for the Phillies because they're playing pretty terrible right now, and they're going to get a few days off here to kind of reset mentally and physically, obviously. So
Yeah.
I think definitely the buy is very advantageous for us right now, just because of our health and lining
Yeah.
up your best pitcher against the other team's third best pitcher is also very, very helpful, or potentially their fourth best pitcher.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And with that said, I do want to talk about this rotation going into the playoffs, Drew. And we're going to go through our playoff roster. Me and Drew essentially had the same roster. So we put it into a graphic here. And yeah, we're going to jump into the rotation first. This is pretty clear cut and dry. I think there's really only one main conversation to have, Drew, which is really about who you would start in games 2 and 3. I think Rob even said yesterday after Rangers start, like he pretty much alluded to the fact that he's concerned. And I think he said Ranger is the fourth starter. I think he said he still has confidence that he can, like he had bad starts in the end of the last 2 Septembers and that he can figure it out. But I think he did say Ranger is the fourth starter. And I think with the top 3, though, you have to feel very confident. And yeah, I mean, these are your 4 guys. Ranger, it sucks to how he's pitching since he came back. Like you hate to see it, but at the same time, he's your 4th guy. So he's going to have to start. I think they're just going to be aggressive going to the bullpen with him when he's starting games. And I think that's probably the right thing to do with how he's pitching right now. And we'll see how he pitches in October. Maybe they won't have to do that, but they've been aggressive with him in the postseason in the past. That would also allow him, if he's not pitching as much in his starts, maybe he can be used out of the bullpen in an NLCS series or a World Series if they do advance there. But that's kind of my thoughts on that. I do want to get your thoughts on the rotation, and I do kind of want to talk about the game 2 versus 3 starter conversation because there's going to be a lot of the debate the next week.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like 1 and 2, Wheeler and Nola, like there really isn't probably a better combo in the playoffs this year. I mean, especially since the Dodgers are so banged up, they might have it if they were fully healthy, but they are very depleted right now. So I think there's really no question Wheeler's the best pitcher in the playoffs this year. Really, no doubt about it. Maybe Garrett Cole, I guess, if Cole's fully healthy, but Cole hasn't. I don't think he's been that great this year. Maybe I'm wrong, but either way, I think Wheeler's no doubt the best. And Nola, he's obviously a big game pitcher. We've seen it. Regular season numbers with him totally don't matter to me at this point because you know exactly what you're paying for with him. You're going to get solid playoff start after solid playoff start. No matter how deep you go, he's a workhorse. So I don't have any concerns with those 2 at all. But the third and fourth spot, I mean, it's got to be Christopher Sanchez in 3. I mean, there's just no way you can throw Ranger out there in a game 3 and have a ton of confidence. I mean, that game with him is probably going to be more like a bullpen game unless they really figure something out while they're off. So that's pretty much just my opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really disagree anywhere. And Nola has had a great year after getting paid too. He has been the Nola we have seen before in a good way. Obviously, he kind of every other year he picks and chooses when that's not the right way to say it, but every other year he seems to be on and off. So um, I think this has been a really good year for him. And like you said, regular season stats, it doesn't matter. He's going to pitch well in the playoffs. And he's now pitched in like 3 regular season clinchers. He's pitched in a number of postseason clinchers. And I think throughout all those clinching games, both in the regular season and in the playoffs, I want to say he has a 1.67 ERA, if I'm not mistaken. Unreal stuff. I mean, that guy he's pitched well when we've needed him the most. And I mean, there's really only been 3 bad playoff starts I can think of, which is unfortunately the D-backs one last year. Still only gave up 4 runs, which, not ideal in a playoff start, but he got no run support in that game. So it's not really all on him. And then the Astros and Padres games the year before. Look, I mean, they were deep into the season. I think Nola had reached kind of his end point of that year. I think his arm was given out on him at that point in the season. So those are my excuses, if you want to call them that. But I think they're valid reasons as to why he didn't pitch well. And again, if those are the only 3 games you can point to, look at all the other postseason starts and clinchers he's pitched in that he's been unbelievable in. So Nola's been awesome. Wheeler, no doubt about it, like has been incredible down the stretch this year. We know what we're going to get out of him in the postseason. He's an ace. That guy just does it when you need him to the most. I mean, these are 2 guys who pitch in big games. But Wheeler, especially, I mean, like you said, might be the best postseason pitcher in baseball right now. And then, yeah, I'm kind of curious your thoughts on. I think this is most likely the order, but I could see them starting Christopher Sanchez in a game 2, get the home crowd behind him. You split up the righties as well, so that way you have a righty and Wheeler in game 1 and a lefty and Sanchez in game 2. And I think Nola is very fit to start in a road game environment in game 3. Especially, again, he's been a guy who's pitched in big moments before. He pitched that wild card game 2 on the road in St. Louis a couple years ago and was tremendous. I don't really think a crowd is going to really get to him very much. I think he's pretty much calm, cool, and collected under pressure. So I'm kind of on board with that line of thinking. I know there are reasons to start Nola game 2, and game 2 is often one of the most important ones in a series. So I do understand that line of thinking. It's just, I think having Sanchez, Suarez back-to-back concerns me a little bit. And I don't know. I'd kind of like to split the righties up, and I like Sanchez a lot more this year going into the postseason than I did last year. Last year, I still felt really good about him. I just wasn't sure how he'd pitch in the postseason. This year, I feel like he's more ready for the postseason moment, and I think he's going to show up in a big way. I think he's going to pitch more than I think he's going to go into the 3rd inning, or go past the 3rd inning, unlike he did last year. So that's most likely going to happen, but you never know. But that's a good thing. So hopefully he can go deep into a game, or at least deeper into a game. And I would probably start him game 2. That's just kind of my thinking, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree because obviously his numbers are very, very different when he's home versus when he's away. So I think there could definitely be an argument for it. Like you said, Nola is about as cool as they come. Like he's not going to get affected by a crowd in the in the postseason. It's just not going to
Right.
happen. He's just that guy when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I don't know. I wanted to say something about Ranger real quick. Like that game with him is probably going to be very similar to the game that Sanchez started last season in the playoffs, where it's kind of like one time through the order, and then they might just pull him and go to the bullpen. So I don't really know, but I think Sanchez probably should start game 2 if I were to give you like a definite yes or no. But I obviously we have no idea what they're thinking.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and to your point about Ranger too, I mean, look at his first start in the NLDS against the Braves last year in game 1. I believe he only went 2 2/3, if I'm not mistaken. So around that. And I think we were all shocked that they pulled him. I know I was when they took him out in the 3rd inning. I remember Ranger himself was shocked in that game and in that moment. So it's probably going to be similar to that, but this time around, definitely more warranted. So it's going to be very interesting how they manage that. Like we talked about, having that wild card week off does give you the benefit of like all these guys are going in fresh, and that includes the bullpen too. Like you have a really strong bullpen. You have like 5 or 6 guys who can give you quality innings out of the bullpen too. And it is scary going inning to inning, just hoping each guy is going to get you through those 3 outs. But you also have the talent to get it done, as we saw in that game last year. And this year, they have the talent to do that again. So I feel confident in that group. And with that, I guess we should move on to the bullpen unless you have anything else you wanted to say about the rotation.
Nope, I think I'm good.
All right. So we have 8 guys in the bullpen right here, which I think they'll probably go with 9 if I had to guess, but I could see them going with 8 guys in the pen and one more bench bat just because it's a shorter series in the NLDS. NLCS, we'll see what happens if they make it there. But I could see them keeping an extra bench bat, especially again, they're going in fresh. They may not need that extra. They may not need that extra bullpen arm in this series. So we have 8 guys, which are the first 5 to 6 are pretty much clear cut. You could even say the first 7, but Hoffman, Strom, Kerkering, Alvarado, Estevez, those are your high leverage guys. I mean, those guys are going to take down big innings. When the top 3 on that list are unavailable, the bottom 2 will get even more high leverage spots. And then Banks, Ruiz, Allard, you could possibly put Banks in a high leverage role against lefties in certain situations, but again, like that's a specialty role. But those 3 guys are going to be more of your bodies or innings eaters. So, yeah, those are the 8 guys we have, and I'll let you start us off, Drew, with any thoughts you got.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the best bullpens in baseball, pretty simply put. I mean, Jose Ruiz is your 7th best pitcher, and he's been absolutely phenomenal back half of the season. He kind of had a little bit of a rough spot there at one point in the season. I'm not sure exactly when, but feels like it was forever ago at this point with how good he's been. So I feel so good about the bullpen. They're definitely probably the brightest spot on the team outside of the rotation. I mean, you could probably argue that they're better than the rotation as far as how good they actually have been for us. They've been nothing short of absolutely phenomenal for us this year.
Yeah, and I mean, I liked our bullpen a lot going into the postseason last year. I think this one is a little bit better. I really do. I mean, you upgraded from Kimbrel for sure, and I think Kerkering is going to be better than the version of himself from last year. Obviously, Kerkering got into a little bit of trouble today. Did not look the best versus New York last weekend, but you're not going to be perfect as a reliever. And he got out of the jam today too. Overall, like I think Kerkering has had very few bumps in the road for a guy who's pitching in his first major league season. Maybe they'll have to kind of keep an eye on him since again he's another guy who's pitching deep into the season when he hasn't really done that before. So definitely someone to monitor as we get further along into the postseason if we are lucky enough to advance too. That'll be something to keep an eye on. But I think he's gonna be a big part of this pen this year. I mean, again, he's really come a long way even in just one major league season. He's trusted his fastball a lot more this year, and that's really the key for him. We knew that coming into this year that was going to be a key. And I don't know. I don't really see too many guys hitting off of him if he's going to trust his fastball enough. For him, it's just really about limiting the free passes he gives out. That's really my only concern with him is he tends to get a little bit erratic sometimes, and he can put guys on base. And obviously, we saw last year that was the issue was he walked in a couple runs. So I don't anticipate that happening this year, but that is something like my one concern with him. But I think he to me is really the key. I think Hoffman and Strom are going to be nails. I think if you have that third guy in Kerkering, you're really in a good spot. And Alvarado and Estevez, they're kind of wild cards, and you don't quite know what you're getting night to night from them. But they are still guys who can take that big innings. And I'll talk a little bit more about them. But I think Kerkering is really the key to this pen.
Yeah, I mean, he's been absolutely unreal this year for us. He's like you said, he's had very few outings where it's been like, wow, what is that guy doing? Like, he just hasn't been like that this year. And obviously, I think last year in the postseason was just a absolutely gigantic learning like opportunity for him, and I think he grew from that like a lot, like more than anybody on this roster. He is more ready now than he was last year. Like everybody in this roster was pretty much on the 2022 team for the most part, so they all kind of had their experience. But him getting that experience last year and having failure in that big spot was definitely just gigantic for his growth.
Definitely. And talking about Hoffman real quick too, like obviously he has the blow up outing today, but I'd rather have him have it today than in October. Simple as that.
Yeah.
So I'm not worrying about it at all. He is still very much the guy I want in the biggest moment of the game against the best part of the order. And that's
Yep.
something else we got to talk about too, is they've used Estevez a lot in the closer role since acquiring him. I don't mind that depending on where we are in the order, but he has been a little bit shaky. And I think we're both kind of on the the wave of thinking that he can't be the closer, at least not consistently in the postseason. I don't trust him in that spot, and I'll let you speak on that too to confirm. But I don't necessarily trust him in that role. I think he can get big outs. I do, and I think he's an important part of this bullpen for sure. And I'm very glad we acquired him because it gives us so much depth. Like the left part of this list right here, those 5 guys, like those are the guys. Those are the ones I want in the big spots. That's why I put him on that side. And Alvarado again, it's going to be a feel type of thing from outing to outing, but he's going to have his good outings, and there's going to be some where we're probably ready to scream if we're being quite honest. But obviously, he's had a lot going on this year. He's had some personal stuff, so that has probably affected his season quite a bit. So I don't really want to get on him too much. That's a lot going on for him right now, and I think all things considered, I think he's still been like pretty good. Obviously, he's had more issues this year than in the past, but I think in October he can pitch in big spots, and I think he will come through in some moments. But he has had some moments where he's not been the best over the past couple of years in October. Overall, he's been pretty solid, but there have been some key moments where he's let runners come across to score. So, but that's kind of like those 2 guys I think are also really important to just add depth to the bullpen, but especially Estevez, I think it depends on what role he's in too.
Yeah, I think if they would put him a little bit closer to the middle innings, he would just dominate.
Yeah.
I don't think any part of the order that's not the very top would really have a chance because his fastball and his slider are very good pitches. Like he's been really, really good for us overall. I mean, he's had a little bit of tough stretch lately, but I think he'll have it figured out come playoff time. So, like you
Yeah.
said, those guys they're very important. So they gotta do it. They gotta figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely been probably I mean, it's not saying much, but the best relief pitcher we've acquired in recent years, I think is fair to say. Like David Robertson was quite shaky when we picked him up. He was not trustworthy in the playoffs. I'm trying to think if we've gotten other guys too. Ian Kennedy, obviously, that was a fail.
Keith Hembry.
Yeah. Yes. Oh gosh, not the COVID year with Workman and Hembry. That was a nightmare, a disaster. Yeah, there's been a number of bad Phillies relief trades that have gone down. So he's been a lot more successful than the other ones. And then the right side of this list again, like you said, Jose Ruiz is really good in that role. I wouldn't be surprised if another team like called in the offseason or next year at some point, like, hey, like we need a guy to be our 4th or 5th. We want to see if Jose Ruiz can be that. Sure, why not?
Yep.
You get a little bit of value for him. He's been solid in that role. He's a guy where like there's certain guys who we've had where if it's 8-2 or 9-2, you don't necessarily trust them to hold that lead. I think Jose Ruiz can do a decent enough job at that. He's had a few scares in those situations, but overall he's been pretty good. Tanner Banks, again, lefty specialist. He's like your Brad Hand pretty much in terms of role. That's what he's going to be asked to do. And then Colby Allard. So I won't be surprised if Taijuan Walker is in this spot just because of, politics and all that. But it's unfortunate with the contract. Like that is really probably the reason he would be in that spot. And again, I'm kind of expecting it, but we're going with the roster we think should be what the roster should be. And Colby Allard, I think, has been by far the best guy when he's been asked to pitch in that 5th spot. And when he's been asked to pitch out of the bullpen too. Like I'm not saying he's been great or even good, but he's been okay. And that's better than a lot of the other options that have pitched in that spot. Like Mercado had the 1 start and then he fell off a cliff. Tyler Phillips had an insanity to run for 3 starts. He fell off a cliff. Taijuan Walker, I really don't need to say anything on him because we all have watched what's happened when he's been on the mound. So he's obviously been he's been the best guy in that role. So he should be in that spot. I thought he looked good in the first inning or 2 of his outing in where was it? Was it New York last weekend or I forget? No, it was this past week. Whenever the last time he pitched was, I thought the first inning or 2 he looked pretty good. So, and again, that spot is not going to pitch in the playoffs, so it really does not matter to me.
Yeah, it would have to be a total blowout for that spot to pitch, no matter who it is.
Yep.
So I'm not really concerned too much about it, whether it's Taijuan or Colby Allard. It doesn't really matter to me.
Yep. Yeah, that's just your Kyle Gibson role.
Yeah.
Although I would probably rather have Kyle Gibson in that role than any of those guys right now. So
I agree.
Yeah. Let's move on to the lineup. This isn't necessarily like in any specific order. It is probably like this is kind of the lineup I would prefer, but like Obviously, Bohm hasn't played well since returning from the injury, so we will see if they put him at the 4 spot. But we can talk about that. Like I trust him at the 4, but these are probably going to be your 9 starters, I would think, going into the postseason. So, any thoughts on this or just on lineup construction?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're gonna see some platoon stuff with Stott and Marsh, I think. I think Stott's a little bit more reliable as far as facing lefties goes, but
Yeah.
I don't really it is what it is at this point with the whole platoon thing. Stott's had a pretty terrible year overall, so I think it's fine. So I yeah, I agree. This is definitely the starting 9 against right-handed pitching.
Yep, definitely. Like you said, there will be platoon stuff, and Mundo Sosa will play over
Yeah,
Stott, I would guess, versus lefties, and then you'll probably have, if Austin Hayes is healthy, he would probably be the guy over Marsh, or Weston Wilson would probably be that guy. So that's something we'll
yeah,
talk about when we get to the bench. I'm curious if he's going to be healthy or not because he had a back issue again today. Sucks. I mean, the kidney thing, like we talked about, it's not his fault. But he's had a rough go of it with the injuries this year. But that being said, like your top 3 in the order, that's what it's going to be. Like I don't have much to say on them. We know what we're expecting out of them. We know they're going to be there. That's that. Obviously, like you said, Bryce has not been healthy this year. Hopefully, that week really helps him just to get fresh and to be as fresh as he can be going into the postseason. Man, I don't think he's going to be 100%, but as fresh as he can be going into the October, that's what we need him at. And I don't think his power has really quite been there, even though he's hit 30 home runs. Like it's still there, but it's not like he's not sending home runs 420 feet like he has before. It's just not. It's not been quite the same feel. But I think he'll be in good enough shape to still make a huge impact in the postseason. So the top 3 guys, I think that's really just it is what like it is what it is. We know what we're expecting out of them. Turner obviously did not have a great finish to the year, but has still had some good moments. I still trust him a good bit. But I think the 4 spot is really where there might be some conversation. I like I said, I would have Bohm there. He's been there most of the year when he's been healthy. I think it's just he's been coming back from injury. He's been a little slow coming back from injury. But I have a lot of confidence in him going into this postseason. I think he's had a better approach at the plate this year. I think he's looked a lot better overall just as a hitter. And Castellanos has been a big reason we've gotten here because of some of the games he saved us in. But I think he's better in that role at the bottom of the order where he adds depth there. And I don't know, like there's just something that scares me about him hitting right behind Harper when a lot of the times in the playoffs, Castellanos can become an automatic out if he's not hitting well. And I want someone behind Harper to protect him, and I think Alec Boehm can do that this postseason. Maybe JT's that guy just because he's been really good in the postseason for us, so that's possible too. Could also just be that he's been the 5 hitter, and that's been a really good spot for us in the postseason a lot of the time. So maybe that's why he's had such good postseason numbers. But either way, like I would put Castellanos above Stott. It's just having 3 righties in a row. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I understand if they do it because Castellanos has been the better hitter this year for sure. I mean, I think Stott puts up more competitive at bats at times, but it hasn't been consistently this year. So
yeah. I mean, like you said, Stott, he's obviously not had a great year, so it's kind of a little bit different than it was last year where he was like absolutely locked into that spot other than like against tough lefties. So it it kind of is what it is this year. I mean, like I'm not happy about the platoons, but I mean, I understand why they do it for sure.
for sure. How do you feel about Marsh going into the postseason?
I I don't even know. Like he's been
Yeah,
so up and down this year. He's been terrible at some points and he's been very good at some points.
yeah,
It's he's obviously an elite left fielder as far as fielding goes, but his hitting has been so inconsistent. Along with Stott, they haven't really had any sort of consistency all year from either of those guys, and they were still one of the best teams in baseball. kind of
yeah,
kind of crazy, but
yeah,
yeah. I mean, I don't really. I'm right on the fence with him. I don't know how I feel.
yeah. Marsh has had a very I guess you could say like I mean, obviously compared to the major leaguer, like it's not an average year, but I would say like it was a very average year for him. Last year, I thought was a very good year for Marsh. I was very encouraged by what he did in last season. I thought some of the strikeouts I thought were kind of unlucky based off the calls he got. This year, I felt like it was just a very all right, like he's. I mean, obviously, it was like you said, it was very up and down. But as far as what it leveled out to, it was very normal, I guess you could say. Which it doesn't really help you a ton. It doesn't hurt you a ton either. But like you said, he's a very streaky player. So depending on what version of him you get, that is really going to help or hurt you in a postseason series. So to him, just adding depth to the bottom of the order is really important. I think the nice thing is with him and Stott, they both still have had very high walk rates this year, and they're still getting on base. So at the very least, you should still get opportunities with them on base where you possibly turn it over to the top of the order. We will see. Johan Rojas is going to come up in some of those spots, which that is the other conversation is you kind of need Cody Clemens on this bench, and he's going to be the left-handed bat that pinch hits for Johan Rojas. That's the way it's kind of gone the past month or so. That's been the move that Rob has made. And I'm curious, before we move on to the bench, just your confidence level in Johan Rojas and what he's done in the back half of the year, I think has been good. But again, I still have concerns about him as far as being in a postseason at bat.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you're facing a good right-handed pitcher, I would rather see like Cody Clemens in left field and Brandon Marsh in center field. That's just
Yeah.
kind of my opinion on it because
Mhm.
Cody Clemens has proven himself at this point. I mean, he is a very good bench bat, and if you need him to start against righties, I feel perfectly fine about it.
Yeah. I might even go as far to say, like, I think I would trust Weston Wilson in that spot too. Cause I think
Yeah,
even against righties, I think Weston's been, I mean, I don't have the numbers up on me. I might be completely, completely off here, but I feel like he's had decent splits against righties this year.
yeah,
He's hitting he's hitting 220 with the 614 OPS, which is not great versus righties, but that's a little more than you've gotten out of Rojas. I mean, again, smaller sample size, but Johan did get over a 600 OPS as of late, so we'll see. He might play tomorrow, so he might end up right below it. We will see. That's an interesting thing to watch. But that being said, I think his defense, like whether or not he starts, having his defense out there for about half the game, I think does make a huge impact. So I definitely
definitely.
he definitely needs to play for sure in some capacity. But I agree with you. I also think Cody Clemens he's the guy you're moving in that spot as well.
Yeah,
If you need a pinch hit at bat, and there are, there's different things you can do. Like you said, probably most likely thing is he'll sit in left field and play out there, and he's athletic enough to do that too. Like he's played out there before. I know he's not a natural left fielder, but he'll be fine. I say that he'll probably make an error that ends the season now. But
yeah,
with that being said, why don't we move on to the bench? We've been talking about them quite a bit, and we did keep an extra bench bat, Drew, which I like that for this series. It's a shorter series. Your pitching is going to be fresh. And I see a need for both Clemens and Weston Wilson. A lot of people are talking about like there might only be a spot for one of them. I think you need both of them. And if Austin Hayes isn't healthy, they're both going to be on this roster, which that's a
yep,
very real possibility right now. Austin Hayes did not play today. He has a back injury. He hits a home run last night, and I was like, okay, well, this game sucked, but Austin Hayes hit a home run, and he's getting some at bats that he needs before the postseason. And then he gets, we find out he's hurt again, which is just really unfortunate. Like I feel for the guy for sure. It sucks. It's not exactly gone the way we wanted it to since he got traded. But I'll say this. I mean, look, Steve Pearce, who Dombrowski acquired for the Boston Red Sox. I mean, I don't know how he played in the regular season leading up to that postseason in 2018, but he was a postseason hero. I believe he was the World Series MVP for that team. I'm not saying Austin Hayes is going to be the World Series MVP, but I just hope he's healthy and like he has his moment in the postseason, because that would make it feel like it was worth it. Because right now
yeah,
it doesn't feel like the best move. That being said, we really didn't give up much, so that's the one silver lining is like you're not upset about giving up Sir Anthony Dominguez for him. Christian Pache got DFA'd by the Orioles, and then he got DFA'd by the Marlins right after that. So that wasn't a piece you gave up, but yeah, I mean Sir Anthony's been about the same, a little bit better with the Orioles for sure as the year's going on, but. And Austin, he's had some good moments while he's been healthy, but it's just he hasn't been on the field, and it's hard to trust a guy like that when you're going into the postseason and to play him consistently. But I do think, I think Weston will be the platoon if Austin isn't healthy, but I would anticipate Austin playing over Marsh against left-handed pitchers. That's just my expectation. So I don't know. I don't know your thoughts on Hayes going into this postseason.
yeah. I mean, it's hard to trust a guy that hasn't played much in the last month or two. It's just it is. I don't really know how I don't know how they're going to approach it. Maybe they'll just leave him off for the
Yeah.
DS just because of the injuries and needing him to get right a little bit. Maybe send him to like the complex to go get some at bats with all the guys that are kind of like the reserves. So I I mean it'll be interesting. I mean if they put him on the roster, there's a good chance he probably doesn't play just because he hasn't played. But he's also a fine like emergency sub, like if you need him. Like Weston Wilson and Cody Clemens could fill those shoes for the first series. I feel pretty confident about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, this is a more extreme example of not being able to trust a guy just because they haven't played, but it's a big reason why even if Spencer Turnbull, if we heard tomorrow Spencer Turnbull is fully healthy, he's ready to go, like maybe he's on the postseason roster, but I don't think he would be on there just because again, you haven't seen him pitch and like you haven't seen him pitch in a professional bat in months. I mean, it's
Yeah,
been forever. So Austin Hayes a little bit of a different story. Like he just missed a decent chunk of time, but again, there's not really been a lot of ramp up now for Austin Hayes and live at bats, and it's tough to go into the postseason without those at bats. So that's just a tough situation. And like we talked about Weston Wilson and Cody Clemens, you talked about them a good bit. I think it's very clear they both have a role on this team, and I think they are very solid bench bats. I stand corrected on Cody Clemens. I said earlier this year that he's just a guy who gets hot for a couple weeks and then he doesn't do anything after that. He did a lot for this team this year. I mean, he really proved me wrong. He must have heard the pod, and I said similar things last year too. He was fun last year, and like you know what, like credit to him, man. I mean, he's carved out a role for himself on the 40-man roster, and now he's kind of forced the Phillies' hand to have him up in September, and he's a 26-man roster guy for a lot of teams. Like he's a decent bench bat. Weston Wilson has also really proven like he's a decent bench bat too. They moved off of Whit Merrifield for that guy, and it's paid dividends. Weston Wilson's had a number of really big moments for this team over the past 2 years, and he didn't even play that much last year. So those two guys are like very exciting, and they will play in the playoffs. Like there will be a moment for at least one of them will have. They're going to come in a pretty big moment at some point. So I'm very curious to see if one of them can be a postseason hero and end up in one of those clutch postseason moments compilations on YouTube that we watch 10 years down the road. So there's always a bunch of random names in those. So we'll see what happens there. And then my only other thoughts, I mean, unless you have anything else to say on those two guys, but like my only other thoughts are on, I mean, again, Stubbs, he's not going to play unless, and even if JT gets hurt, they might bring Marchand up and then play him a little bit. So God forbid, like knock on wood, hopefully JT is healthy. I don't think, again, Stubbs he's the hype man. He's the locker room guy. That's really all that needs to be said about him. But Sosa, man, that's another guy, like we said, he's going to platoon over Stott most likely. He's a valuable pinch runner. He plays a few different positions. He's had a couple nice plays at second base after he had a rough one earlier this year. And he's a really good utility guy. And not a lot of teams have, like, for him to be your best bench guy, like not a lot of teams have that type of guy as their best bench guy. So really happy Edmundo's still here. And his third postseason with the Phillies, which is really cool to say. He's been here for all 3 postseason runs after he got traded here a couple years ago. And he's been a really key part of this team and keeping them afloat. He kept them afloat when Trey went down this year for a good bit. Not just him, but that was a big part of it. And yeah, we're very happy he's going to be an option off the bench in the postseason too. I think this is the most we'll see the bench used in the past 3 postseasons.
Sorry, my dog is like being a weirdo. But yeah, I mean, I agree. Edmundo, he's just one of the best utility players there is in baseball.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, but
You're good. You're good. I have a dog too. All the viewers understand too.
Yeah. But yeah, Edmundo, I mean, he's so good. He's saved this team many times in the last 2 seasons. Whenever guys have went down or guys needed days off, he's had huge games almost consistently, it feels like. Obviously, he hasn't played much in the second half this year, but he's just very, very good insurance to have behind your starters.
Yeah, and the thing to be said about him, Wilson, and Clemens is like we talked about with Hayes, it's just going to be tough after not having live at bats to just jump right into that. Those 3 guys have shown so many times that like they don't need to get in a rhythm and they can come. I'm not saying they're going to come through and do that, but they are capable of just coming off the bench without any sort of rhythm, without like they can just come off the bench in any moment, and there's a possibility they will produce in the right spot. So very, very key to have those 3 guys, and I'm really happy we have them. So I'm curious to see what the Phillies decide upon, whether it's one extra pitcher and they leave one of these guys off, which if they leave one of them off, I'm not saying I don't want to say I hope it's Austin Hayes, because again, like I think he's much more like he's talented enough to be a starter for sure. It's just the rhythm isn't there, and I think that's important for a guy like that, especially if he's not good to go. I mean, we'll see. Johan also was sick, So he did not. They're hoping he's going to travel up to Washington tomorrow to be with the team. I think it'd be good for Rojas to get him one more game before the postseason. He has to play tomorrow if he's good to go, but um, we'll see. I mean, again, I don't know what he's sick with, so maybe they just want to bring him down there. Maybe they want to substitute him in late in the game and just get him a little bit of action before things are done until Saturday. So yeah, I mean that's the roster me and Drew have right now. I don't really have too many other thoughts on that. I mean, again, like if it's Colby Howard or Taiwan Walker, like that's not going to be a breaking news emergency podcast. Like that's not going to be a huge surprise. And again, it doesn't matter. Neither of them are going to pitch unless it's an absolutely like a ridiculous game where there's just no chance of the Phillies coming back or there's no chance the other team comes back. So ideally, neither of them has to get used unless it's a Phillies blowout. And even then, I wouldn't trust Taiwan in a blowout either. I'd rather have Jose Ruiz pitch that spot. So
yeah, I'd rather have Garrett Stubbs pitching.
Just my opinion, but honestly, yeah, that's kind of where I stand too. So anyway, yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm excited, Drew. Red October is just around the corner, and it's weird. We have a week off this time. We get to enjoy the wild card series, and then we have, I think they have an inter squad game. I think they're planning on doing that. I think usually teams do that if they have the bye. So I think they're going to have an inter squad game on Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if that's going to be public or not. So anyway, but yeah, it's exciting, man. Any big thoughts or big things you want to talk about before the postseason comes around the corner? Or I don't have too much to talk about, but
yeah, something I did want to talk about was I don't know if you guys or if any people really remember too much, but 2019, the Nationals when they won the World Series, they had Kevin Long as their hitting coach, and they I believe they survived a bye that year, right?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. I would have to check that, but they had a really good second half. I know that because we choked.
Yeah, yeah, I'm pretty sure Kevin Long was their hitting coach, and they had a bye that year, and they went on to win the World Series. So,
yeah.
I mean, definitely don't count them out just because they have a bye. That's crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
it's definitely beneficial. There's no doubt about it. So, anybody that's trying to tell you otherwise is just wrong.
Yeah, and I know that we're not the 22 Astros. That team was insane. That was actually a ridiculous team. But that is like I'm not saying we're gonna get the bye and then just sweep the NLDS and the NLCS like the Astros did in the AL. But it can be done. Like it's not the big bad like scary monster or anything like that. Whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying at this point. Like it's not all that. If this team comes out flat, that's on them. I mean, that's not on the bye. That's on the Phillies if they don't come out ready to play. And there's other issues to talk about if that's what happens. So I don't mind if they don't quite dominate early on, but you got to win the home games. Obviously, if you split, it's not the end of the world, but it could get a little dicey. I mean, this might be depending on who they play. They might have to win that series in 5, which we'll talk more about that on Monday when we know the opponent and when that's all settled. But yeah, like you said, like the bye isn't necessarily like something that scares me too much. I honestly think they need it, and they also like I forgot what I was gonna say. I don't know, but yeah, they like that. I just think. Oh yeah, I remember what I was gonna say. I think people are kind of down on them right now because they're not playing well. They haven't played well in the second half, and they're gonna have the bye and all that. Like I think people are kind of finding reasons to not have a lot of faith or hope in the Phillies right now, which I'm not saying you got to have all the faith in the world in them or that you got to believe they're going to go all the way. But I also think that's a reason like that some of those are reasons I feel okay is like they haven't quite peaked yet. They peaked a lot early in the year. They didn't really get super hot in the back half, but I think that's coming. And I think that's going to happen in October. And I think they're going to take care of business. We'll see who they play again, but I feel very good about the team. Like I'm really not moved by what's happened over the past couple months or what's happened the past week. Like it doesn't really move me. So I still feel like they're going to be ready to go when Saturday hits and when Wheels goes on the mound, he's going to throw a gem. And like Martian said at the start, like it's all about how the bats back him up. So I still feel very good about this team and I think they're going to show up on Saturday and I think they're going to show up on Sunday too. And I'm excited to see what it looks like for them as they start this new journey to hopefully a World Series run.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely exciting. There's really only time will tell how they're going to play after the bye, but I definitely feel good about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, anything else you wanted to bring up or talk about before we sign off here?
No, I think we covered pretty much everything we needed to.
Yeah. The only other thing I'll say is congrats to the A's on the last win in the Coliseum. Just heartbreaking what's happening to them and to that fan base. I mean, yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame.
It's terrible. Yeah.
It's just athletics are not going to be the same not being in Oakland anymore. Like it's core part of baseball. They've been there for 56 years, or I think that's how long it's been. And it's a core part of that town too. And those fans, like it's one of those things. Like you build it, they'll come. And that's the same with like that's pretty much every team too. Like no one wants to go watch the games when their team's not playing well, and you can't blame it on the fans. Like that's not on them.
Yep.
They tried to relocate to a number of places before landing on Vegas, and they got their wish. So don't believe that letter that got sent out. We tried. What a joke.
Yeah.
I don't think you did try to stay in Oakland. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Pretty big baseball story going on right now. And definitely broke my heart to see the fans like at the end of that game, just a lot of kids and parents tearing up. Like for those parents, like that's where they grew up, That's where a lot of baseball players and a lot of A's players grew up seeing that stadium and wanting to play there too. So um yeah, definitely sad that they're going to be moving to Sacramento for 3 years and then Vegas. And yeah, just wanted to say that. So shout
Yep.
out to the A's fans and shout out to the A's team for winning that last game. They had to win that game. That was awesome. So bittersweet, but there was no other way they could have gone out. So anyway, anything you want to say on that?
No, I mean it's definitely a shame though. I mean that's really all I got to say about it. Just not. It's
Yeah,
not right.
no, definitely not.
It is what it is.
Can't imagine. Yeah, can't imagine having a team move. That would break my heart. But so yeah, hopefully, hopefully the A's fans are doing okay. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate y'all. We're really excited. This time next week, we will be recapping the first postseason game, which is a really exciting thought. And yeah, just keep an eye out for some content this week. I think we're hoping to go live Monday night once our opponent is revealed. Talk a little bit about matchup and stuff, and then throughout the week we might have some pods here and there talking about postseason stuff and preparing for the series. So thank you guys for watching. We appreciate y'all. God bless, and we will see you guys on the next one. Peace.
Peace.